This is Brian Meador from East Carolina University. You are listening to the Sports Objective, the official, unofficial podcast of the Pirates.
Welcome into the Sports Objective. Guys, we have got a great show. We'll start out with Mr. Kyle Barber. How are you, man?
What's going on, Dave? Sitting here on a Monday night in beautiful LaGrange, just taking it easy.
I know you're doing very well. Bubba Rosenbaum, how are you, sir? The billionaire from China Grove.
Yeah. Don't we wish? But yeah, if that was the case, that indoor facility down in Greenville would be happening very soon. But no, doing well, guys. Here we are, just 6 weeks, just over 6 weeks from that season opener down at Bank of America Stadium against App State. Fired up.
By the way, guys, I've been slack on that, and Bubba reminded me. I still have forgotten to get my tickets for that, so I've got to get my tickets for Charlotte. You going with me, Kyle? Are we going together?
I'll let you know.
Okay, all right. It'll be a game time decision. So, an audible Omaha. I guess we'll see how that. But if you need a place to stay, I got the one there in Charlotte for you, my friend, and you can always crash with Bubba and Stacy, I'm sure, in China Grove, right, Bubba?
Of course, and yeah, Dave. Dave got a room at the Westin downtown.
Nice.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, well, I'll either be staying with Dave, the Westin, or I'll be doing my normal Red Roof Inn or Super 8 type of stuff. You know. Speaking of billionaires.
Yeah, I'm not a billionaire, but I wanted to stay there, and maybe we'll work out, see if we can find a place there in Charlotte to do a show. Certainly before that game, we'll definitely do our very, very level best to do that. Guys, a lot of stuff to talk about. And Bubba, you outdid yourself. We got a great conversation coming up. We've got a great guest coming up, don't we, in a matter of minutes?
Yeah, here in the next 10 minutes or so, we'll go to a conversation with Dave Barnett. Dave, down through the years, ESPN, the Texas Rangers, the Dallas Mavericks, San Antonio Spurs, Westwood One, you name it. He's worked for so many tremendous organizations and had the opportunity to call the action for so many awesome games down through the years. Really looking forward to this conversation. The reason he immediately came to mind when I came across him on social media is because I have such fond memories of that 2000 GalleryFurniture.com Houston Bowl at the old Astrodome. Unfortunately, was unable to attend that, but the Pirates lit up the Red Raiders, then held on for the victory.
Dave Garrard and company. And guys, we're going to have another bowl to be talking about in 21. I feel very confident about that. And I know, Bubba, we've got a lot of great, before we get started with the roundtable, I want to mention about the fact that we've got a lot of great content coming up, including, I know we have 2 great guests coming up this week as well.
Yeah, we do. Tune in tomorrow night, that being Tuesday the 20th, and we'll have a conversation with East Carolina's first-year running backs coach, obviously Darrell Sims, back in January, moved on to Louisville to join Scott Satterfield's staff. We hired a tremendous replacement coming up from Georgia Southern, also spent time at App State for 3 years, Chris Foster. I'll be catching up with Coach Foster on Tuesday morning. Look forward to talking about Rajay Harris, Keaton Mitchell, Pop McKay, as well as other guys in that room. But I'm really excited about his addition to this staff. And in addition to that, we'll also have a conversation tomorrow night live with Pete Medhurst. We've had Pete on several times in the past. He's the longtime play-by-play voice of the Navy midshipmen.
And then Thursday night, we've got another big show as well. One guest we've already lined up and one to be determined later. But I know you reached out a great Pirate basketball player.
Yeah, we're obviously primarily in football mode this time of year, but this is something we've been working on for several months. It wasn't able to happen during the season for various reasons, had some technical difficulties. One time we thought we had it lined up on Skype. He was back in his native Argentina, down in Cordoba.
I remember that.
But I'm, of course, talking for longtime Pirate basketball fans, going back to the Bill Herian days, Gabriel Mikulas. Gabe is now living in Charlotte. So really look forward to having a conversation with one of the best front court players East Carolina's ever had.
No doubt about it. And soon we'll also have on with us, I know Cy Seymour told me he's coming on soon, and also Coach Joe Dooley for basketball fans. So stay tuned for that for the summer. Guys, a big announcement out of Greenville today. Wanted to talk about that. I know we have some other stuff, but for Pirate fans, I know that's probably the one thing that's on their mind in Pirate Nation, or one of the things on their mind in Pirate Nation tonight.
Yeah, this afternoon we got a release from Tom McClellan. I think it was a little after 1 o'clock on Monday the 19th. It said Gilbert announces Pirate Club leadership and restructuring. And so basically, we've been without an executive director of the Pirate Club. A full-time executive director, Ryan Robinson, has been wearing both hats. And I was very interested to see who we had hired. And then I clicked on the article, and well, Ryan Robinson is going to be taking on the role in a full-time permanent basis. It said Ryan Robinson was appointed to the dual role of executive director of the ECU Pirate Club and executive associate AD for revenue generation. And it says that he obviously been on staff since January of 2019. He's someone that John Gilbert had that association with from his days at the University of Tennessee. So they had that. So it wasn't surprising when Ryan came on board, but John Gilbert's thoughts on the move. It said, we're excited about the future of the Pirate Club and ECU athletics and how this restructuring will benefit both groups. I appreciate Ryan's efforts over the past 19 months in leading the Pirate Club and ensuring its continued success while dealing with the pandemic and limited staff. He brings great energy to work every day, and he and Drew Moeller, have built a staff that is eager and ready to connect with our fan base. Ryan has had to wear a lot of different hats since he arrived here in 2019 and has done a terrific job of building relationships. But I know he's excited to put his energy and passion into the Pirate Club. And then Ryan Robinson had this to say: it's an honor and privilege to be the caretaker of an organization with such a long history of success like the Pirate Club. I appreciate the leadership and trust from John Gilbert and members of the Pirate Club Executive Committee as we work to chart ECU athletics and Pirate Club's next chapter together. The Pirate Club plays a vital role in the success of ECU athletics and is the direct link to the local community and surrounding region. We have built a team with current and new additions that have the ability and vision to chart a course for the future of the Pirate Club. Coming out of the pandemic, we have an opportunity to emerge stronger, more transparent, and we are committed to serving our loyal and dedicated members.
Yeah, so there you have it. That's I was going to pitch it to you, Kyle, here. What were your thoughts, Kyle, when I know that you're chomping at the bit as we got the text this afternoon. So what are your thoughts on having Ryan Robinson the head of the Pirate Club?
Well, he's been doing the job for the last 19 months, and this whole time, I was assuming we were in the midst of a national search to find the new head of the Pirate Club, the executive director. So my question, first of all, and I'm sure there's a good reason and explanation behind it, is why in the world this decision wasn't made 19 months ago, or 6 months ago, or a year ago, or 4 months ago, or 5 months ago? Why now in July, as we're about to embark on the 2021 football season, has the guy that's been doing the job for the last 19 months been named the executive director of the Pirate Club? It's seems like a strange decision, a strange time, and maybe they feel like they've got on a good role there. Maybe Ryan feels like he's hitting a stride. Maybe there's been some staff changes and all, and they feel like they're going in the right direction. So why change it now? I don't know. I'm sure John Gilbert and Ryan and everybody involved has their reasons behind the decision. I was just very surprised to see that today. You've heard so many times that Ryan has been stretched too thin. He's been asked to do too many jobs. And I guess now his full concentration will be on as the head of the Pirate Club. Because as they said, dual roles, it's all, to me, it sounds like two different titles. It's the same basic job. It's all fundraising. So I'd be interested to see what he does. Nothing against Ryan at all. Ryan's a nice guy. He's always, been good to us here on the podcast. I kind of thought maybe some new blood, maybe some Pirate blood coming in there. We just need something to to kind of get the fan base excited. And, you know, obviously if we can win some football games this fall, that's going to help. And baseball this past, you know, summer helped, but it just still seems like we're in a rut to me as a fan base. And to me, I thought maybe if we could bring a Pirate in to run the Pirate Club, might rejuvenate some people if it was the right guy. But nothing against Ryan, and I think he can do a good job. It'll be interesting to see where we go from here. Just the one question is, why was this decision not made earlier?
Well, simply for me, it's kind of like along your lines. We like Ryan a lot. He's great personally and professionally. I think what it comes down to me, they're waiting apparently to, what it comes down to, they're waiting. My understanding is our good friend Stephen Igo told me, Igo said they're waiting for, I guess, a winning football season to announce the practice facility, or they're working on it. Everybody knows you're working on it. So to me, the best way to handle that is say, this is what it's going to cost for the indoor practice facility, Pirate Nation. Okay, you want that practice facility? Let's put it out there. Let's go ahead and put it out there. We're going to do it. It's going to cost us 15 million, 20 million, whatever it's going to cost us. And that would be exciting right there, my friend. And Ryan's been a huge part of that behind the scenes. Why not go ahead and put that, especially now it's right before the football season. It would be a great time, especially not a lot going on as far as, you know, we don't have football games right now. We don't have a lot of that in season kind of stuff. Now would be a good time, or maybe in August, to make that announcement. In my opinion, it would be a great start for him as now the official head of the Pirate Club. Don't you think?
They mentioned transparency in the statement. So if that's in the works, I mean, you know, maybe they want to wait till there's a more formal plan to announce it. But, you know, I guess the thought process is always you're trying to prey off the press box. And I get that. Yeah, to me, we need to get Pirate Club numbers up. I think if you get Pirate Club numbers up, then those kinds of fundraisers become a lot easier. So to me, that's the first thing we need to do is get more donations in the Pirate Club by creating new members and getting old members back active. And, you know, Bubba, one thing that could be done, maybe Ryan could give people their parking spaces back.
Well, you know, that's the thing, though. Going back to what you're saying, Kyle, I agree with you on that point. But how do you get that very thing? How do you get them excited? You get them excited by giving them what they want. I mean, how many people right now in Pirate Nation, you come on our show and you can tell us why, but how many people in Pirate Nation would say the indoor practice facility is a bad idea? We shouldn't do it. I mean, is there anybody out there?
I think it needs to be done. I don't know that is necessarily going to get the average person fired up. I think it'd get people like you and me and hardcore, you know, athletic fans and football fans fired up. But your average person needs to have their tank tickled. That's what's going to get them fired up, something personal. And that's what we need to get back to. We need to be in the tank tickling business as the Pirate Club. We need some tank tickling going on to some angry fans. And that should be the Pirate Club slogan for 2021. We are tickling tanks. I mean, I'm telling you right now, because I'm being serious. Y'all think I'm joking, and it sounds funny. But you got a lot of angry fans that still have their feelings hurt from what happened with Ruffin, and you got a lot of people who've got the poo-poo face still because of the Scotty Montgomery era, and you know, some other things upset some people. Cecil State, and then some other things upset some people that I won't get into. And you know, it's time to tickle some tanks and make some people happy, and you know, and show some people you appreciate them. A lot of people out there gave a lot of money to the Pirate Club over the years, and maybe they haven't in recent years, but you know, the way you get them back is by really showing you appreciate them, not saying, well, if you do this, you'll get this back, or we can work with you. Just do things like give them their parking spots back, or you know, put them back where they were. Even, you know, maybe they hadn't donated for a year, but you know, we'll put you back where you were, whatever level you know what I mean? I don't do some things. You missed 1 year. We're gonna tell you what. If you go back to donating the level you were before, we'll credit to you with if you donated that amount last year. There's some ways to get people. Sometimes you got to kiss ass. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean,
Hospitality. It's hospitality, and the one thing I will say about that is I was thinking about that this afternoon about the Pirate Club. All of us on this program are Pirate Club members. We've been giving, we're the friendlies and all that, but why am I giving money? I mean, please explain to me, why am I giving all this money if I have nothing to show for it? I mean, I don't care. I mean, I'm serious. Like, what I want to see is our facilities improved. If we have the facilities improved for our players, that's how we get the recruits. If we get the recruits, then that's how we start winning. It's just that simple. And if I mean, why am I giving money if it's not going to anything? I mean, yes, we have scholarships, I understand, but it's more than just scholarships. That it takes more than just scholarships to get the Pirate Club members back. It really does. That's not going to get, and I love them, and I love all the athletes we're supporting. I'm not knocking that. It's an important thing.
No,
Don't get
you're
me wrong.
right, Dave. Well, and it's not only that. It's not only what you're saying. You want to see tangible things like the practice
Yes.
facility. And that's great. That's the right mindset. But unfortunately, a lot of our fans don't have that mindset. A lot of our fans, I'll go back to it again, they need something tangible. They need something. They need to feel like they're getting something. Not
Right.
all
I'm
our
saying
fans.
the same thing. Yeah.
You know, what you're saying is you're saying something. What you're saying is how I wish all Pirate Club members were. What a lot of Pirate Club members need is I social
Amenities, is it amenities for them, like what they're getting?
I don't know. They need something. You got people who can't come to all the football games. You need something. I had an idea that that I pitched on here and about kind of a subscription based service where you get your ESPN Plus subscription included. You get maybe free shipping from ECU Pirates or from pirateware.com or from Fanatics, whoever we come up with a deal with. You get I had a whole list of things you could get, kind of a subscription based service that is your Pirate Club membership. There needs to be some tangible things that are given to the individual Pirate Club members to get them back involved. Because that's just how a lot of people work. A lot of people don't just look at what their dollar's going for, which is what they should. They look at what they're getting out of it personally. And it's sad to say, but that's how people work. Bub, what do you think?
There's definitely a balancing act there. I agree with you. Donors, a lot of them, they need to see something tangible, whether it's a certain print, like they've done down through the years of a big game of Dowdy Ficklin or Clark LeClaire or a certain athlete. I mean, whatever the case may be, something like that for 110% giving, whatever. But then also there's definitely a balancing act as far as, like Dave's saying, and Donnie Kirkpatrick referenced it in our conversation with him last week, and definitely go back and check that out if you didn't hear it or watch it already. But DK was just talking about how, Town Bank Tower is awesome. It's great. Serves a lot of purposes, but at the same time, the student athlete doesn't spend but so much time there. And yes, it's impressive on game days. It's impressive when you bring a recruit, but it's also impressive to be able to show a recruit that they have that indoor facility to practice in, and not miss practice time because of lightning and severe rain. So there's that. I think Town Bank Tower is desperately needed, but at the same time, maybe we didn't have to go.
It was overkill.
$70 million. I mean, and every time you turn around,
we did, and then we could have, spent 10, 15, $20 million toward that indoor facility and maybe some new coaches' offices, meeting rooms, or whatever we want to do. Because Coach Houston also referenced a football building with those sorts of things, and then all the amenities. Some of the things that certain schools have as far as a barber shop for the players and whatever you want to throw in there, pool tables, video games, all those sorts of things.
No, and that's the thing that very thing. I was just going to say quickly with adding that. That's why you come up with we talk about all the time, master plan. You have $50 million, $100 million ambitious campaign. We believe that you guys had a tremendous campaign going. Keep that going. We believe. Hey, Pirate Nation, you want all this stuff? You got to pay for it. How do you think we're going to pay for it? You're going to give it to it. And that's how you do it, is you start doing that. You say, we're going to do this and it will get done. But everybody knows what we need. It's not like we're saying we're not saying we're going to put a monorail around the stadium. We're simply saying these are things that are needed.
Dave, I'll tell you one thing that I think has hurt us. we had a goal for forever, getting the Big East, getting the Big East, getting the Big East, Big East, Big East, Big East, Big East, Big East. And we finally achieved that goal to the best of our ability with getting into the American. And there was always something we were building to. When Terry Holland was here, our goal is to get in the Big East. We're going to donate this money and get these facilities because we wanted to get the Big East. We need to start talking about our goal now is to win the American. And now, if the playoff expands, to make the college football playoff. Those words need to, particularly if the playoff expands, because then it becomes a real expectation. That needs to be the goal. We need that said publicly. And you want to get a fan base fired up, you get out there. And like I said, we need that playoff to be expanded officially. And you get the AD and you get Mike Houston and you get out there and you say our goal is to win the American and make the college football playoff. And we cannot do it without getting an indoor practice facility for recruiting. We cannot do it without selling out Daddy Ficklen Stadium. That is our goal. The Pirates seem to do best when we have something we're trying to achieve, when we have something we're fighting for. And we need to get that mentality back. And I particularly, like I said, if the playoff expands, I'd really like to see us state that publicly. And it needs to be just like college baseball. The reason we're so damn good in baseball is because every other word coming out of our mouth is we want to go to Omaha. We want to go to Omaha. We need to be doing the same thing in football. Our goal needs to be to win the American, whether we have a shot to make the playoff or not. So if the playoff doesn't expand, what needs to be coming out of our mouth needs to be our goals to win this conference in football. And I hadn't heard anybody say that. I hadn't even heard Mike Houston say that. And we need to quit being scared of it. Skip Holt said one time people are scared to shoot for the moon because they're scared they might miss and hit the stars. So very cliche, but it's time to start having those goals, stating them publicly, and get some people fired up. That's one way to get people to donate. Is you got to give them something to achieve.
You're no doubt about it. 1-800-ECU, Bubba, ECUPirates.com. You get those tickets, or you might next month. You'll find out your way. Obviously, you can make sure you pay attention here. You'll have a chance to win tickets and a lot of cool stuff for next season, right? For this coming season, I should say, for 2021.
There you go, Bubba.
Yeah, no doubt. I got you, Kyle. As far as articulating a vision, though, I mean, look at Clark LeClaire Stadium. I mean, we had Harrington Field, which obviously we put some tremendous products on the field there at Harrington. But if you're being honest about it, it really wasn't a whole lot. It was a decent playing surface from what I recall. But as far as the stadium around it, I mean, it was a high school stadium basically. I mean, right. Maybe a very nice high school stadium, if that. But
we didn't even have lights until
right.
the early.
We didn't have lights for the
working
longest
lights.
time. But Keith LeClaire had a vision, and then that vision was articulated. And then you take a look on the third base side, going toward the baseball offices there on the backside of Clark LeClaire Stadium, the plaques of the people, and there were obviously others, but the major donors for that project that were giving 20,000, 5 or 10,000 major gifts. Like you're saying, we could do something very similar with this indoor facility, and I'm sure we will. But like Coach Houston said, it's time to get the ball rolling.
Do you guys think, and then we'll get to this interview, do you, unless there's something else that needs to be brought up, do you guys think that if it becomes official that the playoff expands to 12, and then we theoretically have a path to the playoff, do you guys think that am I off base there when I'm thinking that can really be used as a tool to for fundraising to get the fan base fired up?
I think so. I mean, you look at it right now, there are a lot of guys that are, and you look at players, we're going to put a winning product on the field. Mike Houston's going to do that. And then when you have a chance, I remember guys, I'll tell this quick story and I know we got to run. I remember when Skip Holtz I was coaching at the Eastern North Carolina School for the Deaf, and he was talking about, I said, Coach, love having you at my alma mater with ECU. You've been a lot to me. You come here tonight. I was really appreciative of the time he took to be with my athletes for our athletic banquet. He was a speaker, did a great job. And I was talking to him about it. He said, Dave, he said, when I'm trying to recruit, this was obviously, what was that? 2000, and it was 2009, 2010. And he said, Dave, he said, when I'm trying to recruit, I can't I can't compete with the guys that he's talking about, the Big East, USF, where he eventually went. But he couldn't compete against them because they were always using the fact of that very thing about not being in that time, I guess, BCS, right, guys? So, but he was talking about recruiting and how much it hurt him, when he, like, which is now I guess, Power 5 schools would be doing the same thing to Mike Houston. So having a clear path to the playoff, you better believe it would be great for all of us, including you were talking about, Kyle, with the fans. I mean, that's what this fan base needs is every single week. And another thing I mentioned, guys, I know that we love it as far in the hardcore fans, but there are a lot of fans out there that don't really care about the American as far as they don't have the, unfortunately, we talk about the ACC bias around here in our area. But when you know that you have a chance to play for a national championship, every single game is going to matter. Like all of a sudden, we know how big Navy is, but you look at all the other schools that we're fighting for. We're going to be fighting for our lives to make that playoff spot. You better believe those games are going to be important, and I think they'll take the American more seriously. Don't you, Bubba?
Yeah, no doubt. And I agree with what our guest that we're going to be going to here in just a minute, Dave Barnett. You'll hear his thoughts on the topic as far as the potential of the 12-team playoff. And I agree with him. It's just one more feather in the hat. And yes, there are long odds there, but in East Carolina or, whatever so-called group of 5 school can say, hey, you legitimately have a chance to get into the college football playoff and compete for a national championship, which you've seen over the last few years with UCF and Houston and others, and that's not going to happen now.
And I don't even think they're long odds, Bubba, in terms of making the playoff. I think.
Oh, no,
yeah.
Not as far as making it. I just as far as winning it, probably.
Yeah, no, I think you can make a legitimate argument that if they expand to 12, I think you can legitimately, if you're Mike Houston, tell a recruit you stand a better chance of winning the American at East Carolina than you do winning the ACC at NC State. I think you can legitimately say that and look them straight in the eye and tell them the truth. And if you win the American, there's a good chance you're going to go to the playoff. It won't be guaranteed, but if they actually use that language where it's the top 6 conference champions, if that language isn't changed, nobody has a guaranteed spot. It's just the 6 best conference champions.
Guys, the last time that NC State and North Carolina won the ACC, 1979 and 1980. So if you think the ACC is so easy to win, then it's even harder now with Clemson being as good as they were, and of course Florida State before that. But NC State and North Carolina haven't won that since 1979 and 1980, those 2 schools. So to win a conference championship. You guys ready to go to our interview now?
Absolutely.
All right, let's go. Right now, we're going to go talk his career. We'll talk about everything. Now, with play-by-play voice of North Texas, here's Dave Barnett. Well, it's college football time pretty much as we're getting ready for college football season 2021. And Bubba, another special guest. You did a good job as always, my friend.
Absolutely. Welcome into the show for the first time, the voice of the North Texas Mean Green, and formerly of ESPN, as well as a lot of other outlets. Welcome in Dave Barnett. Dave, how's your summer going?
The summer is going well here in Texas. We haven't had a 100-degree day yet. I don't think in my lifetime I could say that this late in July.
We could say the same
global
thing.
Warming.
Yeah, we can say the same thing, Dave. It's not as been as hot as we're used to in the July, and who knows what August is going to bring, but we're enjoying not as hot temperatures we're used to. But we're welcoming you into the show because we want, obviously, any day we can talk about football or sports, period, is great. And how are things looking there at North Texas and Texas, period, as far as college football? And high school football is going to be around the corner, too, for you guys.
That's every year the best brand of high school football anywhere in the country. As far as the state of Texas, I think a lot of anticipation at Texas A&M to see if Jimbo Fisher can build on a top 10 season last year, maybe actually challenge in the SEC West. And then, the other spotlight will be on yet another new head coach in Austin. That job for more than a decade now has produced mysterious failure after mysterious failure. But I think, and they said this about Tom Herman, I think they're very convinced that they now have the guy in place and the staff in place. So, I think that will be a week in, week out story this year, not just locally, but in terms of nationally. As far as North Texas, coming up back-to-back below 500 seasons, it's a position that Seth Luttrell has not been in. He came in and immediately brought about great improvements. Won the West Division year 2, Conference USA, but he's not been able to repeat that. They've been in a bowl almost every year. They have yet to win a bowl game. And he said on day one, every year his teams will have 2 goals, which is win the conference and win a bowl. So he's won a division, gotten them in bowls, has not won a bowl yet. The defense has been the issue every year. Last year just could not stop anybody. And so Seth has brought in Phil Bennett after several years out of football. I'm sure he thought he was retired, and Seth talked him into coming, and he's changing the philosophy, he's changing the alignment. It's going to be more of a multiple defense than the 3-2-5, 3-3-5 that they had been going with. Defensive linemen were openly lobbying to change. They didn't say fire our defensive coordinator last year, but they did say we don't want to keep playing a 3-man front defensively. So, there may be some 3-man front, but it's going to be a completely different look, and that's what this defense needed.
Phil Bennett, very experienced coach, obviously former head coach at SMU. Was part of the Baylor staff when that scandal went down with Art Briles. You mentioned he was retired for the last few years. How does Seth convince him to come out of retirement and be a part of the Mean Green staff?
I wish I had been available to maybe through wiretap to listen to those phone conversations. I mean, they go back a number of years, and I think like most coaches, somewhere deep in their gut is always the desire to be on the sideline, even after they retire. I don't think that ever really goes away. So from that standpoint, I don't think it's a shock that Phil jumped at an offer that he thought was good. From Seth's standpoint, he needed to get somebody who has some skins on the wall, who is not a first-time coordinator or, even someone who may have had some experience, but not at the Power 5 level for the number of years that Phil has. So it's experience, number one. I think it's the fact that he is bringing a different look and a different system, because that is exactly what the program needed. They've been one of the better offenses in the conference, and often one of the better offenses in the country ever since Seth took over. But that's not been enough for him to achieve those goals of conference championship and bowl championship. So I don't think this is a make or break year at all for Seth. The administration loves him, but he is one of the most competitive people I've ever been around. And I don't think he could live with himself if he didn't make the best changes possible on the defensive side of the ball this year.
Yeah, and like you said, not a make or break year. I was going to ask you if his seat's getting hot. It might not be this year, but if he posts another losing season, then all of a sudden next year might be.
Next year might be.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you before we move on to another topic about North Texas and Conference USA in general. 2 questions about Conference USA. One, what is their media rights situation for this coming season? Is it the same as it was last year, which is kind of a hodgepodge of ESPN and CBS Sports and Stadium, et cetera, or is it different this year? And 2, go ahead. I'll let you answer that first.
I don't think anything's changing conference-wide. A couple of years ago, they had to deal with the NFL Network showing Saturday afternoon games, which I thought was brilliant on the part of the conference, and pretty smart of the NFL Network, because, I don't know that many people are watching anything involving the NFL if it's not an actual game up against great college football on afternoons, but that was a 1 year thing. And so, yeah, I think it's as you said, it is kind of a mixed bag of some network exposure, a lot of streaming exposure on Stadium.
And I one more question to follow up for that, and then I think Bubba has some Conference USA related. I back a few years ago, North Texas was part of the Sun Belt Conference, and the Sun Belt, at the time when the Mean Green left, the Conference USA looked like a clear step up. The Sun Belt has upped their game in terms of on the field performance and has got a better TV deal. Do you think there's a place for Conference USA and the Sun Belt to get together and form two more geographically sound leagues?
Wow, as a merger, I'm not sure necessarily.
Not so much a merger, just working together to form two new leagues that make more sense geographically. To me, it doesn't make a lot of sense anymore. There's no advantage to being in one league versus the other to me. So when I look at it as an outsider and I go, why in the world is an Appalachian State playing in the same conference with Marshall and Charlotte? And why in the world is it North Texas playing in the same conference with Texas State, and et cetera?
Yeah, it would make a lot of sense. Basically, Sun Belt is now what Conference USA intended to be. And the AAC has taken a lot of major programs from Conference USA. And so schools like North Texas, Western Kentucky, and a few others moved up from the Sun Belt to Conference USA. And at the time, it was a no-brainer. It was considered a definite step up. What's happened in the Sun Belt is they've made some great head coaching hires there. And, Appalachian State and Louisiana, just to name two, that are coming off fantastic years, and not for the first time in the case of Appalachian State. So I think definitely you'd be onto something in terms of geography and national rivalries, things like that. But I'm not sure what the legalities would be there in terms of contracts, et cetera. So it's one of those things that make so much sense to us as fans, but once you dig into it, I doubt it will happen.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
At least in the near future, I doubt anything like that will happen. But we'll see. I mean, maybe Conference USA loses a school or two, and that's an opening to bring up Appalachian State or Louisiana, or we'll see.
Dave, let's take a quick look at the league. Just not too deep into any one team, but I saw the media poll came out today. I saw on the east side, you have obviously a new coach at Marshall, Charles Huff. The Herd got 17 of the first place votes. And then you had FAU with 6, and then Western Kentucky in third place with 1 first place vote.
Yeah. Really kind of shocking what happened at Marshall last year. And they started 7-0. They're number 15 in the country. And then suddenly Rice comes out of nowhere and ruined their season, as it turned out. They lose out, and Doc Holliday loses his job. So there was obviously talent. There's a very talented young quarterback coming back. UTSA has, for a still very new program, I think made a couple of really good hires. Larry Coker to start out with, and now Jeff Traylor with maybe the best running back in the country coming into the season, and Sincere McCormick. And the previous staff, Frank Wilson had not been a coordinator or a head coach, but was hired on the basis of how well he recruited, and especially in his previous job at LSU. It turned out that that didn't really work. They weren't out recruiting that many people. They made some great pickups, but I think they've been able to kind of draw a line around Bexar County and keep a lot of very talented San Antonio kids home. One of the best high school programs in the state every year for decades is Converse Judson, the northern suburb of San Antonio. They've kept a lot of those kids in San Antonio and made huge strides on the field last year. So UTSA had been one of these programs that people always looked at as potential. They play in the Alamo Dome in a city of 1 million plus, and all those resources had never really produced a big breakout year, and last year I think was the breakout year. So now we get to see how they can perform with high expectations, and that's a different ball game. But I think they're along with Marshall, with a brand new head coach and all the talent they have coming back, I think they're definitely the two programs that will draw the most interest and scrutiny this year.
And you talk about UTSA, the Roadrunners did receive 9 of those first place votes. You also have UAB, who received 15. We're huge fans of what Bill Clark has done there in Birmingham. Just remarkable job with UAB, 40-22.
Yeah, he puts a good team out, especially defensively, every year. And so anything UAB does is never a surprise to me. I don't think nationally that many people are aware of them. There are probably a lot of people that vaguely may remember a few years ago that they dropped football and then immediately brought it back. And now they've got a new stadium on campus about ready to open. So having to play in Legion Field, which had a great history, but was decades past its great history. And in some ways, it's remarkable that UAB is able to do as well as they have done the last few years, having to play in Legion Field. So now with the upgrade in facilities and a chance to add to the campus, and I'm sure get more students to attend football games. On top of what Bill has been able to do year in, year out, anything they do will never surprise me.
And back in 80, go ahead, Bobby. Do you have something else?
I had one more, a program that we're very familiar with, have a long history with, and have some close friends down in Hattiesburg. Southern Miss, new head coach Will Hall, the former Tulane offensive coordinator, and I love this hire. I think it's an excellent fit. He's a Mississippi native, and he's a guy that's, in his at least two D2 jobs, he had compiled something like a 55 or 60-20 record. I mean, he'd won 70+% of his games. So I just love this hire. I think Southern Miss is going to show pretty quick improvement.
Yeah, when Southern Miss is down, it's never for very long at all. I mean, it's usually maybe a one-year dip. The bizarre thing about their season last year was they went through so many coaches. I mean, I talked to one the week that they played North Texas, and a couple of weeks later, he's gone. So I'm sure they made a hire based on the thought that they won't have to make another change, hopefully for years and years. But it's another program with so much history, really only a couple other schools in the state that they have to fight for high school talent. That's another place that could use a new facility, but I don't think there's any on the drawing board that I'm aware of. It's just it's not the kind of thing that draws a lot of financial support in the state of Mississippi. But just as I said about UAB and throwing Louisiana Tech, anything Skip Holtz does never surprises me. And as a program, the same is true in my mind for Southern Miss. Down years are usually outliers, and they usually bounce back. 6, 7, 8 wins wouldn't be a shock.
Yeah, I was going to say about UAB a minute ago. I remember back growing up, 86, 87, Coca-Cola was struggling against Pepsi and decided they were going to do away with Coca-Cola Classic, and they brought in New Coke. And then everybody wanted Coca-Cola Classic back, and it's been kicking Pepsi's ass ever since. I use that same equation with UAB. UAB did away with football. Bill Clark hung around. They brought it back, and UAB football has never been better than it has right now, and got a new stadium on the way. I don't think any of that ever happens if they didn't drop football.
Well, the other thing is they were able to get a waiver on roster size and the size of a recruiting class, and that's a gigantic boost for them restarting football. And the rest of the coaches in the league didn't talk about it publicly, but I guarantee every time they were playing UAB the last couple of years, they would have loved to have had as giant a recruiting class as Bill Clark was allowed. And it's not like they had to spend a year away from football because of some natural disaster. That was their own choice.
Yep.
And they, immediately reversed it, but it was their own choice. And long term, it ended up benefiting them in terms of the number of people they were able to bring in recruiting class. And so I don't think that was the original goal of the president when he announced the closure of the program, but it turned out that was a factor that Bill Clark is a good enough coach to take advantage of that, and he has.
No, he was just doing the bidding of Bear Bryant Jr. at the time.
No question about it. And that very fact of having, that was one of the most bizarre stories, especially when we know how much football means to the state of Alabama. We know how much it means there. And I think there is some people that even thought that it was some shenanigans behind the scenes to get rid of UAB, because that would mean it would be just Alabama and Auburn. They're already important. I've heard some stories behind that. I don't know how much that is true.
Dave, the story I've always heard, and if this is hard to believe that people would hold this kind of grudge, but Coach Bartow, as in Bartow Arena, UAB, him and Bear Bryant did not get along, and this was all supposedly, to get rid of UAB football, Bear Bryant Jr.'s behalf for his dad, because he hated Bartow. Yeah, so it's insane that stuff like that would happen and grudge would be held for all those years, but who knows?
It does sound like a major stretch. However, if there was any place where something that bizarre might have something to it, and then I'd not heard that, but in the state of Alabama, anybody that has some power and authority and money and thinks there's one thing they can do to improve the state of their football program, they're going to do it.
No question. I wanted to ask you about your expertise with college football, your thoughts on the expansion of the college football playoff. I know there are a lot of us, including on this show, everybody's talking about it. I guess it's great because we don't have the college football season, so anything we can talk about college football, but how do you feel about the expansion of the college football playoff?
Definitely needed to happen. And I think they realized that the same basically 5, maybe 6 schools making the playoff year after year after year, even though they're great programs, was not good for the sport. It's been to the point that ESPN has talked nothing but the playoff from day one. And in my opinion, devalued the regular season. And so the fact that Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State will, Georgia and Oklahoma, the other teams that have been fixtures, will now have a bigger field to have to navigate. Nothing but good, I think, for the sport. It's the fair thing to do, because the group of 5 schools, like Cincinnati, was the most recent example, who it didn't matter how good they were on the field, they simply were not going to crack that tiny field of 4. That's not good for the sport. The surprising thing to me was it took them as long as it did to expand the field, because all they have to do is look at basketball. Since basketball expanded March Madness to 64 plus teams as opposed to the 16 and then 32. I mean, look what's happened to the popularity of the sport. Look what's happened to the coffers of the schools that benefit now from March Madness, and the fact that it took football so long to do the same. And who knows, or if this goes well, they may expand another round. Now I think the next step needs to be get rid of conference championship games, because even if I'm Nick Saban or Dabo Swinney, I would not like the idea at this point that with everything else you have to navigate in the regular season, you also still have the conference championship game and then an extra layer added to the playoff itself. But we're talking about money. We're talking about guaranteed checks. And the next time I see anybody in college football, especially, do anything that in their mind might cost them a cent will be the first time I've ever seen that. It would be beneficial for the players, definitely. I think for the coaches, but it's a financial question that we usually see end up decided in favor of whatever makes the coffers bigger.
Now we're still waiting on
definitely definitely it's good though for the sport overall to expand the field of the playoff. That's a decision that I don't think has really any downside to it.
We're still waiting on an official vote on that, right, guys? That has not been voted on officially, has it?
Well, no, but it's going to happen. I mean, that's a technicality.
Okay. Well, that's great. Particularly if the language stays the same, where you have the top, as it's worded right now, when you go to 12, it's going to be the top 6 conference champions get an automatic bid. With that language, for the American who has been presenting themselves as a Power 6 and the 6th best conference, I think it really does a lot for the American Athletic Conference in particular. And, we're a little biased being based in Eastern North Carolina and East Carolina. But I really think it's going to be beneficial for all Group of 5, but particularly for the American.
Well, we were talking about Marshall. If Marshall had been able to finish out their start, 7-0 and number 15, they had won out. They would have been in the conversation if this had been the state of the college football playoff last year, which it wasn't, and they didn't. But now at least there is the possibility of a Conference USA school, a Sun Belt school, definitely an AAC school. Will get a chance to see what they can do up against the Alabamas and Clemson.
If it would have been last year, of course, last year being a unique year, if Cincinnati and Marshall both won out, both could have been in a 12-team playoff.
Yep. And that is what makes college basketball to me. The fact that there's always a chance that even a 16 seed, now a 16 is beating a 1. Every year there's 13 seeds, 14 seeds winning, and Cinderellas. And football has kind of precluded that from their picture to their own detriment. And now there will be what most people will consider a Cinderella. This past year, Cincinnati would have been the obvious candidate for that. But if and when that happens, a Group of 5 or even a more prominent program with some history like a Cincinnati or an SMU or Tulane, anybody that cracks the same old, as great as they are, I think the average college football fan starts to yawn when it's always Alabama, it's always Clemson, always Ohio State, Oklahoma, 1 or 2 others. Again, it's surprising to me that it wasn't like this from the beginning, and that they didn't come to this realization before, but they finally have. And the way things move at a glacial pace in the NCAA, the fact that it's happened, that's ultimately all that matters.
No question about it, Dave. And the fact that we'll move on after this, but the very fact you look at softball, for example, in the College World Series for them, and when you have James Madison, they were fantastic, a great story there. That's what's missing for me with college football is there's a lot of storylines that are missing that couldn't be had if you have an expansion of the playoff.
Yeah. Coastal Carolina has a national championship in baseball. So, there needs to be a Coastal Carolina national champion in football. And
we'll go with East Carolina instead.
Or East Carolina, or North Texas.
Exactly.
I mean, it was an impossibility before, and now it's improbable but possible.
What I want to know is how
it's great for the sport.
What I want to know is how is it going to affect recruiting for a Group of 5 schools who make football a priority. Like Marshall, like East Carolina, like UCF, like Cincinnati. With now having access to the playoff, assuming it passes, I would imagine it's going to have an impact on recruiting.
Well, if for no other reason than the schools are recruiting against on East Carolina can't say, well, okay, yeah, they're a good school program, whatever, but you can never win a national championship there. An Alabama can't make that appeal anymore against a UAB. So I don't know if it's been a difference maker in that many recruits' minds to this point, but it's one thing that can't be used against them anymore.
Dave, let's talk about your career. Obviously, a fellow broadcasters we are. How did you get into broadcasting, and what gave you the broadcasting bug, as they say?
Tonsillitis at age 8.
Really?
Yeah, we're on a family trip to San Antonio, and my dad ran a program for the Presbyterian Church that was a 1-week program at Trinity University in San Antonio. So we stayed in the dorms, and we got there on a Sunday, and it rained, and I was running around with a bunch of other kids on the campus and came down with tonsillitis. And so that entire week, I didn't get to do any of the activities. I stayed in the room with no TV, nothing to read. The only entertainment I had was my dad's transistor radio. And so I'm flipping around, and I found a good top 40 station during the day. And then they shifted their power down at night. So I flipped around again, and I found the Houston Astros baseball game. It happened to be playing the St. Louis Cardinals. So I listened the first night. I had, I think I'd played 1 year of Pee Wee baseball at that point, but I wouldn't call myself a fan. But I remember distinctly how descriptive Gene Elston and Lowell Pass and then Harry Callis actually were the Astros broadcast crew, and the way they painted what the Astrodome looked like. It was the second year back then. And I, got interested enough in the game that I came back the next night. And the next night I realized these are the same guys I heard last night. And they're talking about they're going to do the game tomorrow, and then they're going to go to Los Angeles and do the series at Dodger Stadium. So my 8-year-old brain figured out, well, this must be their job. This is their job. They must get in free. Well, wait, if they get in free and it's their job, they get paid. They get paid to go to Major League Baseball games and talk about them on the radio every night. And for some reason, that seemed to be even a better job than the players had, which still kind of amazes me. But that was it. I to this day can name every member of that Houston Astros roster and every member of the starting lineup of that St. Louis Cardinals team. So, the bug bit me hard. And I never, from that point forward, thought any other job would be better. And so by the time I got to high school, I was thinking, well, as competitive as broadcasting is, maybe I ought to think about being a writer. And so I, already knew I would either major in journalism or broadcasting. And the more I looked into what North Texas had, and I grew up right here in Denton, and North Texas at that point was one of, I think, 3 schools in the country that had a program for sports broadcasting. Syracuse and University of Tennessee at that point are the only ones that I knew of that also offered any path to sports broadcasting. And so I really could not have been at a better place to put myself in position to, if I ever got an opportunity, start a career out. Between my junior and senior year, I'd had a professor who found out that a station in Dallas, KRLD, was changing their format from easy listening music to all news all day, which was a new thing in radio back then. And he had been to a convention over a weekend, and he met the newly hired news director for KRLD, and he asked if he'd filled out his staff with me in mind, it turns out. And Ken Fairchild was the name of the news director. He said, no, we still got some openings for, tape editor, writer. And so the professor called me and said, call this guy. I think you can get a job for the summer. And they were so desperate. I called him. He said, sure, come on down and talk to me. I went the next day and started the next day. Now that's desperate. I had just turned 20. I still had a year to go in college, but and it was minimum wage, which was, I think, $2.90 an hour. I would have paid them just to sweep the floors at that prominent of a radio station. They had been the sports station in Texas for years, carried the Cowboys, the Rangers, SMU sports, Southwest Conference sports. And so that first summer, I was 4 a.m. to noon and writing, editing tape, and it turned into an opportunity in sports because there was also the first nightly sports talk show in Texas, hosted by Brad Sham, who was still the voice of the Dallas Cowboys, something coming up on half a century. And he didn't have a producer for his talk show or someone to cover the events and the games that he couldn't get to or didn't really have any interest in. And so he sort of slowly started to draw me away from the news department to extend what had been a two-man sports department. So I stayed on and became his producer and kind of the number 3 sports guy, occasionally allowed on the air to fill in through my senior year at North Texas. Graduated, went full-time for the following year. And at this point, the Dallas Mavericks had come into existence. Their first year, they had hired Mark Holtz, who had been voice of the Denver Bears AAA baseball team, but had also done some basketballs. He was the original voice of the Mavericks, and after 1 year, hired away by the Texas Rangers. Baseball was Mark's first love. And so 6 weeks before their second season, the Mavericks were left with no broadcasters. So there was not enough time for them to do a national search, which if they'd had even another month to do, I'm sure they would have. So they're limited to people in the market who had done some broadcasting and were available contractually. Well, I had done a few dozen games as a student at North Texas. I had done 2 SMU basketball games filling in for Brad on KRLD. And I was far too unimportant to be under contract at KRLD. And Brad was definitely important enough to be under contract. So I think he may have, been their choice if he'd been available. So I was local with some experience and available. And so suddenly at age 23, I'm an NBA play-by-play guy, which would never have happened if I had gone anywhere else. I originally wanted to go to the University of Texas. That this would never have happened if I had gone there. I might have a career. I would not have had the career that I ended up having if I hadn't gone to North Texas, which, there's just been a flow of sports broadcasting talent behind me that's come through there. So I'm one of many who have a similar story.
What years were you at North Texas?
75 to 79.
Okay. All right. I was checking to see if you might have crossed paths with one of my favorite celebrities, but he was a few years after.
Who's that? Who's that?
The legendary, incomparable, national treasure and global giant, Stone Cold Steve Austin.
No. he was Steve Williams back then.
That's right. Yep.
And that's the bottom line.
No. Yeah, he was after me. I was though there for the Hayden Fry years.
Okay.
9-win season, 10-win season, hired away by Iowa.
And still at Iowa.
Oh yeah. Became a college football Hall of Famer with what he did for the Hawkeyes. But I was there when football was good to great every year. Basketball was my freshman year. They went from 6 wins to 22 wins with the number 2 scoring team in the country. Wow. Right behind Jerry Tarkanian's UNLV team. So great time to be there, and especially as a young broadcaster. It was just a great laboratory for me to learn how to have a career, which I've been fortunate enough to do.
So after having such a tremendous opportunity there early with the Mavs, I think you spent 7 years with them, and then you went on to the San Antonio Spurs. Just talk about being able to cover, just a legend like David Robinson.
It surprised a lot of my friends that I accepted the offer from the Spurs. The Spurs had been really good team through the 70s and 80s. The George Gervin team, Sardis Gilmore, they had a lot of talent, but they weren't the Lakers. They could never get past the Lakers, but they had drafted David Robinson and they had hired Larry Brown, who just won the national championship at Kansas. So I knew they were going to be a very formidable team. I didn't necessarily know they were going to win 5 championships, but that was a factor. The bigger factor was I had done mostly radio with the Mavericks. Not every game was televised back then. I think it was 15 over-the-air telecasts. But the business was moving away from most fans following their team only on radio to fans expecting every game to be televised. So that's where the industry was going. And just to be in step with that and more well-rounded as a broadcaster, that was the other thing that really appealed to me. My first year, I was a one-man simulcast broadcast. Same broadcasts going out to radio and television. The next year, they separated the broadcasts, and I did television only. And that's when David arrived and Sean Elliott, and they started the run that they were on until Kawhi Leonard went nuts and left a couple of years ago.
So after that run with those 2 different NBA franchises, talk about your path to ESPN. And I don't know that it was necessarily the first game that I heard you call, but the one that really stands out with our love of the Pirates was that 2000 GalleryFurniture.com Bowl that I mentioned to you when I reached out about you coming on the show. And obviously that was extremely memorable for us because we put it on Mike Leach and the Red Raiders that night at the Astrodome.
Yeah, I remember it because I had such a bad cough. I thought maybe I'd contracted tuberculosis. I was just trying to get through that game. But yeah, that was when the country was just starting to get an inkling of who Mike Leach was at Texas Tech and what his system was all about. And it was one of the first bowls to have a name that made no sense at all for an average college football fan, because it's what's Gallery Furniture? Well, it's a local furniture powerhouse in Houston, and run by a huge college football fan who actually played at North Texas. So, that's a long way from the Bluebonnet Bowl, which that game had been called, and the Astro Bluebonnet Bowl when they moved from Rice Stadium to the Astrodome. So that's the other thing I remember is we've got to constantly remind people where we are and what this bowl is. It's the new chapter of what used to be a pretty good bowl game, the Bluebonnet Bowl. But yeah, very. Every game I did involving the Pirates, they were really impressive. Steve Logan, put together a great run. The first game I did at ESPN, which was, it kind of was my on-air audition, was 1995, which was the last year of Southwest Conference football. And I had done Southwest Conference Game of the Week from 1989 through that final season in 1995. There was 1 week where there was no game of the week. All the Southwest Conference schools had the option in their contract of declining 1 game a year that Raycom wanted to show, and every team declined that week. And I had gotten a call from ESPN which was in the first year of ESPN2. So they were starting to expand. They had only had a noon game and a nighttime game on ESPN. And they had this 1 week where they wanted to, throw their line toward me and see what they thought. So it was Ohio State at Minnesota. And it turned out that following that, perfect timing, because there was no Southwest Conference anymore, but ESPN made me an offer for all three of my sports, football, basketball, and baseball. And if it had not been all three sports, if it hadn't been a year-round, dream offer like that, I loved San Antonio so much, and I loved the Spurs so much, and I knew that this is going to be a powerhouse franchise for years to come. But this was a one-time only offer, I knew, and so that's how that came about. At that point, I had been, as you said, 7 years with the Mavericks, 8 years with the Spurs, and had done turned out to be 7 years of Southwest Conference and some Texas Rangers baseball thrown in. So it was the kind of thing any kid dreams about, especially an 8-year-old kid with tonsillitis years before ESPN existed, or really even cable sports existed. If you told me that night that the path lay ahead that turned out to be there waiting for me, I never would have believed it.
Yeah, you brought up your time with the Texas Rangers. Did any of that time overlap with Nolan Ryan?
Yes. First season I did was 1990, and Nolan had come the previous year. I had first crack at calling his 300th win, because that was a home game. I was doing only home games, and huge buildup. As soon as it became apparent when his start was going to happen with the chance at 300, at that point, probably that was the most anticipated game in franchise history, and he didn't have it. He did not have it that night. So his next start was at Milwaukee, a game I was not broadcasting, and he got his 300th then. So yeah, and then when they hired me full time in 2009, Nolan was running things at that point. So yeah, I got a chance at the tail end of his career as a player to see him in action, and then once he was well into his stellar career as an executive.
You weren't happen to be doing the radio play-by-play for the infamous Nolan Ryan Robin Ventura incident, were you?
No, that was, I think, the following year. I don't remember exactly what year that is, but that's still one of the most talked about games in the history of the franchise. And whoever took the picture of Nolan,
the headlock,
blood everywhere, and he's giving Robin Ventura noogies. That's one of the most reprinted pictures, I think, in the history of Texas sports. Yeah, I would have loved to have been on that call that night, but no, I missed out on that one. And I didn't get any of his no-hitters either.
Were you aware that outside you were in Texas, so were you aware at that time just how popular Nolan was outside of Texas? Bubba and I were around the same age, early 90s. We were in the heights of our baseball fandom and collecting baseball cards. And, I had probably over 200 Nolan Ryan cards. I was a Nolan Ryan fanatic, and I'm here in North Carolina.
Wow. Yeah, I was aware because when he was with the Angels, I was following him from half the country away. Even though they were playing their games, mostly well after I'd gone to bed. But he was that guy that had that kind of an aura and was doing what no one had done before. It's really too bad that the radar gun didn't exist. Because I do remember in the Guinness Book of World Records, he was listed as having thrown the fastest recorded pitch. I think
110.
It was 100.8 miles per hour with, I guess, radar borrowed from the California Highway Patrol. I don't know where they got it, but it wasn't a nightly feature, and you couldn't look up on the scoreboard and see the velocity of every single pitch. But I would guess that he must have been averaging 98, 99, and he probably would have hit 100 plus on a regular basis every start back then. That would have been something.
No doubt. What are your thoughts quickly on? I know you've been generous with your time with our interview, but what are your thoughts as far as baseball with the contraction? I mean, looking like there's a potential of the baseball contract with the owners and players. It's looking like in December that might. Do you think we're going to have a strike? Do you think we'll have a lockout? Is that on the horizon for us?
It's always a possibility. There's so much for both sides to lose that, and it's been so long since things have, come to that point in baseball that I've got to think that they'll hammer something out. To me, what they need to hammer out has more to do with how the game is being played than who is going to make however much money. Because it's the sport has become almost unwatchable to me on a nightly basis. It's run by people who base the analytics on mathematical probabilities as opposed to what people, in positions of authority, what managers see with their own two eyes. And so, lineups are made out by a computer. When I first heard that the Astros were doing that, and this would have been about 10 or 11 years ago, I thought that can't be right. That's somebody's gotten their information. There's no way a manager would go along with that. No matter what a computer spits out. So what that has led to is home runs aren't, the highlight that they used to be because they're so common. There's no embarrassment in striking out anymore. Batters don't adjust with two strikes. Small ball in almost completely taking strategy away, like hit and run, the stolen base, the things that used to captivate your mind, because you never knew what a manager might decide. Now they don't decide. All they decide is how close their pitcher is to 100 pitches, and no matter how well he's doing, he'll get yanked. I mean, it cost Tampa Bay the World Series last year because they stuck with the computer mentality as opposed to what everybody in the world could see for their own eyes. It's taken away what used to be the best drama of the game, which was a starter working deep into the game. Great starters head to head would still be in there in a battle of endurance in the ninth inning, sometimes extra innings. That's been removed now, and I would much rather see a starter trying to gut out 8, 9 plus innings than the parade of guys out of the bullpen throwing 98.
Yeah,
it's to the point that I can't sit in front of a TV for 3.5 hours and stick with the game anymore. So what do they do about that? Well, they're starting at the edges, I think, to address the problem. The first thing is make batters stay in the batter's box. Make them stay in. Say you can step out once for a bat. When I was becoming a fan, Mike Hargrove was first baseman for the Texas Rangers. He was the only guy in baseball who would step out after every pitch and readjust his helmet and his gloves and his sweatbands, and he was known as the human rain delay because his at-bats took so long. Well, everybody's Mike Hargrove now. Pitcher's standing there and staring for 30 seconds, just staring, and then finally throwing a pitch, and then the batter's going to step out for his own 20 to 30 seconds. So those are the kind of things that would be pretty easy to address. I think they ought to do away with the shift. I don't know if that'll ever happen, But the things that have become the hallmarks of analytics baseball to me are robbing it of its attractiveness. A young kid like me would have done anything to go to a major league game. Now I've got grandkids, so I'm not sure I could get to stay for all 9 innings of major league games, because I think they would end up being bored to death. It's really sad that the game has been so taken over by the computer mentality, as opposed to putting the emphasis on putting a watchable product on the field. So, I don't know how much that issue will be part of the contract talks between the players and owners, but I hope that it's addressed, because this is a dangerous time for the sport. I think it's really at a point where the generation of fans that they need to be counting on to follow the generations before them, they can't count on that at all. There's kids who'd much rather just sit at home and stare at their screen than go to a Major League Baseball game. So that to me is what's hanging over the sport, and I'll be very interested to see how they address that, if they in fact do.
Down through the years, Dave, you've called so many different games at so many different venues. What's a game or two that really stand out? Maybe your favorite one to call, and then obviously, if you want to go by sport, if you want to do it that way, and then also maybe a favorite venue or two.
It's a question broadcasters get a lot, and my answer has always been my favorite sport is the one that's in season. If it's football season, nothing I'd rather be doing than calling a football game, and same for basketball, and used to be the case for baseball, less so lately. Probably if one game that stands out above any other, it's actually two. Josh Hamilton's 4 home run game in May of 2012 in Baltimore. And in 2009, also against Baltimore, Ian Kinsler's 6-hit cycle. I doubt baseball fans today have any memory of Ian Kinsler's 6-hit cycle. That's much more impressive than a 4-homer game or a perfect game. It's the only 6-hit cycle in the 20th and 21st centuries. And Ian wrapped it up by the 7th inning. He got his triple in the 7th inning, 6 hits. So that was history that, I'm the only person, and everybody else was calling the game that night, that saw that. For basketball, I got to call the NBA All-Star game on radio in 1986. This was before there was an ESPN radio, and so the home team got to put together a one-night network or one-day network, mostly consisting of the other NBA affiliates. And the home broadcaster got to call the NBA All-Star game. So in 1986, it was Hall of Famer versus Hall of Famer everywhere you look. It was Moses Malone against Kareem. It was James Worthy against Dr. J and Larry Bird. It was Ralph Sampson. Isaiah Thomas was the MVP. Magic. The peak of the sport to me. And the All-Star game was at the height of East versus West, Lakers versus Celtics, and there was huge pride on the line. And there was probably more energy expended on the defensive end than the offensive end in that game. They went at each other. They tried to embarrass each other defensively. So there was that much intensity. And, to even be able to see that as high a level as the sport, I think, had ever been presented to that point, much less to describe it to a national audience. That I will occasionally look back at those rosters and just shake my head at how much talent was out there when an all-star game mattered. When players weren't just out there, jacking 35-footers and playing no defense at all.
Yeah, when it wasn't 170 to 165.
No, absolutely not. The biggest oohs and ahs out of that crowd were block shots. And one in particular, I remember by Ralph Sampson, that he sent into about the 10th row. It's a bygone era, and it's too bad. It's too bad that's not how the All-Star game is contested anymore. For football, it's really hard because, especially once I got to ESPN, I mean, every week we're getting high-level matchups. Boy, I don't know if I could zero in on one.
What's an exciting finish you saw in football, like a field goal or Hail Mary or something like that?
Well, the last year of the Southwest Conference, I had Virginia at Texas, and I had been told by the Texas broadcasters the day before that game that John Malkovich was probably coaching for his job, even though this is a midseason non-conference game. Virginia had a bunch of NFL talent. They had the Barber twins, James Ferrier, and looked like they won the game. Texas has a 50-yard field goal into a 20-mile-an-hour wind. And Philip Dawson makes a 50-yard field goal into a 20-mile-an-hour wind on the final play of the game. So in terms of seeing an impossibility happen, and it may well have been at that point to save John Malkovich's job, he ends up winning the final Southwest Conference championship. He takes Texas to a Sugar Bowl and then a Fiesta Bowl. He has Ricky Williams at that point. That would stand out. As a kid, I grew up watching all the Texas-Arkansas games when that was a conference rivalry. The game of the century, the big shootout, 1969, one of my earliest memories. And I got to call the final 3 Texas-Arkansas games when they were conference rivals. That's definitely a highlight. I've gotten to do so many big rivalry games: UCLA, USC, Michigan State, Florida State, Virginia Tech, on and on. It's really hard to boil down a highlight. I will say I got to call one Rose Bowl, and just to be in the Rose Bowl wasn't it turned out a great game. USC blew out Illinois, but I'm in the Rose Bowl. I'm calling the Rose Bowl for ESPN Radio. So, as a kid, never having been to Southern California, most of what I knew about it was what I saw on TV, and to actually be there and there it is. That's definitely a highlight. It's the only Rose Bowl I did. I did a number of, I think 4 Orange Bowls, a couple of Fiestas, a Sugar Bowl, but that's the granddaddy. And if you've never been to the Rose Bowl, you understand exactly why it still has the aura that it has. Definitely a highlight.
No question about it. Dave, thank you so much for your time. For folks that want to listen to the games this year, tell everybody how they can listen to your broadcast. If you're like us, I love to listen to broadcasters on the radio and television, obviously, but how can people follow your work?
The best way nationally is tune in. Download the TuneIn app. So that's the way to do it. It's not hard.
Thanks very much to Dave Barnett, guys. He spent a long time with us. Dave, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And whenever you listen to this podcast, what a great show. Kyle, do you have anything before we go?
No, I'm fresh out. Dave was a very interesting guy to speak to. He not very easy interview. You give him something, he runs with it.
No question about it. Definitely a great broadcaster, and what a great story how he.
By the way, sounds like Tom Brokaw a little bit to me.
Oh yeah, that's right. I hadn't thought about that. He is a tremendous voice and actually became a broadcaster. What a great story of how he loved broadcasting at the age of 8 when he couldn't do anything that week because of tonsillitis. Man, what what a story there he had to become a broadcaster, having that transistor radio. Bubba, do you have anything before we go?
Over the last few weeks, we've caught up with Donnie Kirkpatrick, offensive coordinator, and most recently, and prior to that, Blake Harrell, defensive coordinator, and special teams coordinator Tim Dowse. So go back and check those interviews out if you have missed them. And then, like I said, we'll have Chris Foster headed your way, the new running backs coach for the Pirates, and some others here over the next several weeks leading into the season.
No doubt about it. I want to give a big shout out to Tom McClellan, who's always been very good to me, going back to the Skip Holtz days. As far as our relationship, he means a lot to me, and he's been very kind to us to help us out with that. And also, we're going to have Houston coming up this summer as well. So we look forward to that. Guys, do you have anything? We're going to wrap this thing and put this podcast to bed.
Season tickets. Make sure you buy those season tickets. Right now, it's right around 12,000. We want to eclipse the 14,000 mark, which is definitely very attainable. Embrace your inner pirate. Call 1-800-ECU or ECUPirates.com and get it done.
All right. Thanks to our great guest, Dave Barnett, for Kyle Barber and Bubba Rosenbaum. I'm Dave Richmond, and you've been watching and listening to the Sports Objective. Good night, everybody, and go Pirates.